right, welcome everybody to a impromptu, not scheduled, random conversation here on LinkedIn Live. My name is Anthony Kennada. I'm the co-founder of a company called Audience Plus, and I'm joined in the studio here in Phoenix, Arizona by the one and only Morgan Ingram. Thanks so much for being here.
I'm happy to be here, man. Glad we could get this sorted.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have to give people the premise behind this. I just kind of grown up in the industry, I suppose, as a marketer. I've heard of Morgan. I've seen your content for years. Honestly, one of the first movers probably in B2B content creation that I've seen, at least in the sort of modern sense. And I think we might have had a few like LinkedIn messages like across the long arc of time. In the last year or so, we've spoken twice.
Yeah.
30-minute conversations virtually.
Yeah.
1 month ago. And on those calls, I'm like, look, I want to get dinner with Morgan. I want to get to know him better. Like,
there's so much madness.
I'm like, so much madness. How do we find time? Different parts of the country.
Yeah.
And then we see each other in New York in passing at an event. I'm on my way out, running late to a meeting. I'm like, I want to spend time with Morgan. I want to get to know him better. And we didn't get a chance to dive in deep. So we thought, like, what makes the most practical sense? Let's just stream our first real conversation ever, with like no agenda, no prep questions, and just get to know each other live here on LinkedIn. Take some questions from the audience and be able to, I don't know, see where this goes.
Yeah, exactly. Here we are.
Thank you so much. Maybe before I dive in, do you want just a quick intro to yourself for folks that might not have been exposed to your content?
Yeah, so we're talking a lot about content today. So I started off as an SDR in 2016, created a YouTube channel called the SDR Chronicles on LinkedIn. And that's where content for me really took off. Then went off and been a sales trainer. I was at JB Sales. So I did top of the funnel strategy for Zoom, Snowflake, Slack, all those on how to actually go get meetings. Yeah. And today I work and founded AMP, and we're really focusing on media production. How do you take content, turn that into revenue? What's the strategic ways of thinking about content? Because now it's like, you can't just create content to create content. How does that advance pipeline? So that's what we're solving right now.
Awesome. I want to dig in on that for sure, talk about AMP quite a bit. But the only question I prepared was a icebreaker, as it were. When we did have our initial phone calls, you and I both, the webcams came up and we both had a Kobe Bryant something on a backdrop. I had a jersey. I think you had a poster or something. It might be a jersey too. And it was like instant bonding. For a word was like, forget everything else. Exactly. Let's spend 25 of the 30 minutes talking about Kobe. Yeah. Just curious, as folks are logging on and seeing the stream pop up for the first time, and wondering what the heck we're doing. I'm curious, kind of just, it might sound silly to ask this, but like, what has, why do you have that on the wall? Like, what has Kobe meant to you? Maybe across, the personal dimension or anywhere you really want to take that. I'm curious kind of what he represents.
Yeah. So for context, the first sport where I felt like I could be really good at was basketball. I had done baseball. I was good at it, but it was way too slow. So if you play baseball, I'm sorry. It was too slow for me. I was like, okay, I batted and like, I can't do anything else for like 9 innings. Like, what are we doing? And so when I finally, that clicked for me, I was like, okay, so who do I want to watch to be great? And so I've obviously heard of Michael Jordan. I know who that is, but I wasn't alive during the time when he was like at the peak, right? So I watched like the Reggie Millers and things of that nature. I was like, oh, these people are great. But I remember watching a Magic game versus the Lakers. So I'm an Orlando Magic fan. First game I ever went to was Orlando Magic, so that's why I'm a fan. And so I saw Kobe and he dropped like 50 on him. I was like, who is this dude, right? It's like, why is he killing my team? Yeah. So then I did more research, and it wasn't just around who he was as a basketball player. It's how he morphed his mind as a basketball player. So what he was reading, how he was studying, like he would cold call people just to get information and insights on how to get better at certain craft that he had nothing to do with. So for me, he was an example of getting 1% better every single day. And how do you truly become great at your craft? And he was the first person that like I had done research on and studied that was truly dedicated and even admired by his own peers, where it was like, whoa, like this dude's too intense. And these are other NBA players saying
top of their game,
right?
Like, totally.
And so what I have behind me is just like the quest to become the version of your best self, because I just don't know what else I would want to focus on and do besides that.
Yeah, it resonated that so much. I grew up in Los Angeles with a basketball in my hand. Single mom, I remember only child. being out in my backyard, like with my Kobe jersey on, like just, counting down 3, 2, 1, putting up crazy shots, trying to just like, not use the word idolize literally here, but like this guy, like I looked up to so much growing up.
Right.
But you're right, as you sort of mature and you sort of start applying some of those principles in sports, athletics, whatever it is that you sort of grew up, really doing to the professional context now, as a marketer, as a business professional, an accountant, whatever, there is something about the tenacity of pursuing greatness, of the honing your craft. And it was so awesome to see him, even, unfortunately, obviously, we'll never fully see the fruits of this, but applying that craft to like storytelling and poetry and animation, like the Dear Basketball thing.
To the whole level.
Pretty amazing inspiration, I think, for anyone, if you're not a sports fan too, or not a basketball fan, to find those people like in your career that you can sort of try to model,
100%,
which is really, really great. All right, so I want to build up to AMP, but one of the questions that is coming to mind when I first got exposed to your content, it was sort of this perception of like Morgan as creator. Yeah. And again, I do feel like you're one of the OGs of this in our industry, because at the time I was the CMO at Gainsight. I think when I really saw a lot of the content you're producing, I don't know that I'd heard of the creator economy at all, even in the consumer context back then, let alone in B2B. Curious kind of maybe what led you to start creating content online, and then just walk me through, like, what was this like, 5, 6, 7 years ago? Yeah. And then now seeing this is actually like a thing. People are modeling what you've built.
Yeah. So transparently, I never wanted to create content. I didn't want to do it at all. In UGA, I studied finance and sports management. So I wanted to go be a sports agent. Cool. So I saw Jerry Maguire show me the money. And I was like, okay, this is me. This is what I want to do. But I always wanted to stay behind the scenes. I didn't want to go and create and be out there, because I had acquaintances that had started creating content on like Facebook. If y'all remember that Facebook organic content days, that was a whole thing.
That's like a social network, right?
Yeah.
It's like LinkedIn. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So not another call. I don't know what they're doing right now, right? And so I knew a lot of people that created content, but they would always get like approached. They would get like they would have influence, but their lives were stressful. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I don't want that, right? Yeah. But I remember just talking to someone about it, and they were like, you can still make a lot of impact. And if you do this earlier on in your career, it'll give you access to other opportunities and relationships that most people won't ever get. Yeah. And it'll take you longer to get. Yeah. So when I was an SDR, I was like trying to figure out what to talk about, because like I had no exits. I didn't close a deal yet. I didn't even know what a CRM was, or, I was like, what are these acronyms? Like, I was like overwhelmed. I was like, I don't know what to do. So I met Gary Vee like 6 months into my SDR role. He was at Rainmaker. So he was the keynote speaker. And I was like, hey man, I'm trying to create content and I have no idea how to like do this, like without seeming like I'm lying or something like that. And he's like, well, just document it. Just like talk about what you're doing, because he's like, no one can take that away from you. You're not lying. You're in this role. Yeah. Just talk about it. Yeah. And so I was like, all right. So then I just kept it super real, called it the SDR Chronicles. And I was like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to talk about it. Here are the failures. Here are the obstacles. And also as well, like Ralph Barcy, who was the VP of Sales Development at ServiceNow at that time, he wrote an article about how an SDR should create content. So my whole thing in life, my dad says this all the time, is he's like, pray and observe. So he's like, if you are struggling with something or you're trying to figure out what the next step is, he's like, pray about it and then observe. So like once people were like, document, I saw the Ralph Barcy, I saw create SDRs of content. I had done content on Facebook. I saw multiple people being like, I don't know how to do this role. I was like, all right, I guess I'll just start it. Yeah. And then that's when I started creating the content. And man, in the beginning it was very difficult. Not creating the content, but dealing with people not understanding it. Yeah. So I would have people come to me and be like, you're not credible for this. Okay. And it's like, okay, I'm talking about my role, but people are like, you shouldn't create content yet. Like you haven't been in the game long enough.
Do you think that's because, as I was thinking about like the sort of like starting point for this creator thing, I think the word that came before it was like influencer marketing. Yeah. And as influencer has this assumption that like you have 20 years of documented working history, like whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas a creator, to your point, is more of like documenting the journey.
Exactly.
Is there like a distinction
Influencer
there?
has a negative context for sure. That's also why I don't do in the beginning, because like if you think of an influencer, it's like, okay, they like do entertaining content, it's fun, but they have no credibility.
Right.
And they make money off of not being credible, just being entertaining.
Yeah.
And so OG days, like YouTube, I don't know if you remember Periscope. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
So I was on Periscope doing 3 lives a day. So like everyone was just like, oh, an influencer, you just make content, you make money. That's not that hard. Making content is extremely difficult, first and foremost. But I think also as well, it just has a negative context. So I just wanted to say like, hey, like I'm just creating and documenting what my life is, and I'm not trying to do anything else. But because it was coming from, I had no exits, I wasn't a VC, I wasn't a trainer or a consultant, and I was just a rep doing this. People are like, this is unheard of. Why are you a rep doing this? Don't you have a quota to hit? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm hitting my quota. But like, I wanted to take the extra initiative. But it was very hard in the beginning because there was no other people creating content.
Right.
And the people who were creating content, they were out of scope. So they had done 20, 30 years of content and they didn't want to talk to me yet because they just thought I was just some random kid. Yeah. And so it was really hard for me because I felt very lonely in that process because there was no one who could relate to what I was doing, and they didn't get it at that time. Yeah. But I knew that was the right direction. And obviously we can see what's happening today. It was right. But at that time it was hard to continue on because it was like, it was just mentally hard. Yeah. Because no one got it. And it was just like, you had to just believe in yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
Did your team and like at the company while you were the SDR, were they like supportive? Were they like, hey, he's like zagging while others are zigging? Yeah. Going to help the company?
That's a great question because I had respect on the team because I was hitting my numbers. Now it'd be different if I was like the lowest performing rep.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, where's Morgan? He's filming another interview again. Like, so it's just like, that would have not been bad. But my commitment was, hey, I did content before I got to work. I would edit at night. And on the weekends, I would come into the office to record everything.
Okay.
So the CEO would always see me and he's like, dude, what are you doing? It's like, yeah, well, I'm doing my work during the week, but like, I still got to do this content. So I would do it on the weekend.
Wow.
And so I got respect from my team and they appreciated it because I was in the trenches with them. Yeah. I did the 100 to 120 cold calls. Like I was doing the email campaigns. I did the video prospecting, right? So I had respect from the team because I wasn't just a creator. I actually was doing the work, right? And I think that's another huge piece that a lot of people in the space are missing right now is that they're not doing the work and they want to be a creator, but it's not, you're not going to get respect internally. Yeah. And my boss, I like shout out to Lucas. Like he was just an incredible boss and mentor for me. He said, look, you're building this external brand and that's great, but he's like, the internal brand is just as important. Yeah. Because if a rep asks like, how's Morgan? And it's like, oh, he doesn't hit his numbers. Yeah. Then like all the content I'm doing actually isn't supportive. Yes. So you lose on both fronts. And so people are jumping too quickly to like go build the brand when you still need to have credibility of what you've done. So anyone can always back check anything I've done in my entire career up until I founded my company. Like every company I've been at, I've hit the number. Yeah. I've never missed it. Right. Right. And so that has to have the credibility there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such an important like observation for now the B2B, the trail that you've blazed. Right. Right. Now there's others who are creating content within the work context where before it might have been, and I might be totally off here, live TV, but makeup tutorials, like influencers, like on the consumer D2C kind of.
Well, fashion's always been way ahead of it, right? Totally. I mean, even for like, actually, it's a question for you. Like, if you're looking outside it, right? So you found my content, you've probably seen other people's content. How are you actually looking at this person and be like, is this a credible subject matter expert versus a person creating content?
It's a good question.
Because you probably look at it as an executive and you're like, okay, like that's cool content, but like, could this person actually like get in front of an audience with me and actually speak to relevant points versus just creating good content? Because those are two different things too.
Yeah. It started with skepticism, if I'm being honest. Like, before starting this company and everything, like, I would see what's happening on Instagram in that feed. Oh, right.
Instagram.
And it's a whole like other world. Yeah. And it's like they're playing checkers or whatever, or chess while we're playing checkers on LinkedIn. And I'm shipping white papers in my feed, right? Yeah. And so when you first start to see that blend over, you're like, okay, now you have people that are applying in my like eyes, which again at the time was very nascent in this whole world, was like they're applying the sort of modern creator thing to work. Right. Interesting. Like what like there was a little bit of like kind of a thing. Like,
Right.
will this work? Is this something that actually will develop? And I think what started really shifting my perspective of it was just how I think the word authentic is coming to mind.
Yeah.
That was like forget about like subject matter expertise for a second.
Right.
Like I think that matters for sure. That's important. But like the content was delivered in a format that felt approachable, and it was in my feed.
Yeah.
And it was dynamic, and it was relevant. And all of these things are not necessarily like, again, subject matter expertise is important, but that wasn't necessarily like a requirement. And so I found myself starting to pay attention, and I think that's where the initial light bulb starts going off a little bit, because you're like, I don't know some of these folks, but they're standing out, and I'm paying attention to it. And I can't remember the last time I filled out a form to download a white paper, but I'm listening to this guy Morgan. I'm listening to all these people. And when things like Substack started happening, I'm like, okay, well, actually, I think I'm there on the right side of history. Yeah, I think it's all of us that are stuck in this old way. Yeah,
because it's what you're used to.
It's what we're used to.
Right.
And I think honestly, like I'm not like 36. I'm not like whatever. I feel old. But generationally, like there's a whole group coming after us. That's the default way of consuming content.
Yeah,
it's they don't know what a white paper is. I never download it. Never will.
Yeah, I think I was on a webinar, and they work with TikTokers to do campaigns with like enterprise clients, and they were telling us that a Gen Zer consumes 20,000 pieces of content in a day. In a day. And so it's like, when you think of that, it's like, oh my goodness, like it's changing.
The landscape has changed. The other one, when you said TikTok, sparked my thought, is I was at Hopin when we were like, what's the TikTok for enterprise strategy? Yeah. And I'm like, what? Like how can I
even think of this?
How do I think about this? We got a pipeline target hit. How do I create a 30-second video that's going to somehow drive pipeline on this TikTok thing? And we start, all of that has led to the two observations for me. One is the world is moving in this direction. Yeah. You can come along or not, but this is where the world is headed. Right. Number two is the observation, at least from the work context, not so much for like the consumer industry. Those are very important channels, TikTok and all that. Yeah. We need something more. We need something to be able to build that relationship when TikTok potentially gets banned, when LinkedIn changes their algorithm, when Elon finds another target to press on X or whatever.
Who knows at this point?
Right. So we need stability, because at the end of the day, we have a business to build on top of all of this. And so seeing what Substack and Patreon and others had done in the consumer context, seeing what Salesforce was doing, Salesforce Plus, felt like there was an opportunity to build something here. But it started with that seed of like, there is no doubt that this is where the world is headed.
Yeah, it is. It's actually this is actually really, really interesting. And I haven't actually said this yet on anything. Yeah. But I think I'll give everyone context. So I was at SaaStr, and someone came up to me and they're like, "Hey, I don't understand why people come up to you and say what's up." Right. And he didn't mean it in a mean way. Huh. He was just like, "I don't understand it," because he's like, and this is I was like, okay, this actually is a good conversation. He's like, you haven't had any exits, right? He's like, you're not like, you founded a company and you went crazy, but he's like, the amount of people that come up to you and say, whoa, Morgan, what's up? And have a connection with you is very high. Yeah. Why is that compared to other people who create content and have, maybe more accolades and credibility? And I was like, okay, like, I'm not offended by this. Like, this is a legitimate question, right? Sure. And I said, well, at the end of the day, when you're creating content, the difference of how I see things is that I'm always looking to connect with the audience. And I don't really have like, gotcha. Yeah. I'm like genuinely focusing on.
It's not a thinly veiled pitch to something.
No. It's just like, here's what I'm doing. I'm documenting it, and I keep it very transparent the entire time. Like, I'm like, hey, this is a mistake I made. Here's something that was really cool. I actually don't over-index on sharing a lot of wins, because I think that a lot of social media is fabricated as an illusion. Yes. I'm really just trying to tell people this is exactly what's going on, and then there will be wins along the way. Yeah. And so I was just telling him that, like, one of the best ways to do that, and obviously in what y'all are building with obviously the shows and things of that nature, is I show up on video more than most people. So like when you go and do a webinar or even a live conversation like this would terrify people. Because they're like, I need a script, I don't know what I'm saying. It's like, but I know who I am. And so I'll show up on a video and say what I need to say because I know what I am and what I do. And I said, that is a connection that most people don't have. And that's what they feel like towards me, because I'm just like, here I am. This is what I do. This is what I'm about. I know my points because I know who I am. And a lot of people fabricate those things because they haven't, maybe they just haven't done that work. They're not good with content. But I think that's like another piece of where we're going, is that there's a lot of brands, a lot of people, they may have had success, but they don't have humanity within the brand. Right. And so the more you can create humanity with yourself and the brand, that's where the connection lies. So I just thought it was like a very interesting conversation we were having, because like, yes, that is true, but also there's connection to person, which is hard.
So you're authentic. You are bringing your true self, knowing who you are, and you're willing to get in front of the camera. And then on the other end of that is an emotional connection. With at scale. And you know, what is our job in marketing if not to scale emotional connections between brands and audiences? And so makes a whole lot of sense to me. And as you're talking about that, I want to talk about it because I think that kind of builds towards now how you're helping other companies, other brands do the same. Basically take your life's work to something and translate it to
for sure. And you can attest to what you're building. Like, yo, being a founder is not easy. Like this is probably the most.
Don't recommend. This. I'm kidding.
You know, it's just like it's. I was on Twitter. I can't call it that. It's like it just doesn't. That doesn't make sense. I'm calling it Twitter, right? And someone was like, building a company in entrepreneurship is like is basically like your soul out in the open. That's how it feels. Exactly how it feels. It's everything.
We have like, man, I tell you, it's a whole other thing. I don't want to take us off track, but you know, we can. The context switching is insane because you go from like, you know, a great customer win and they're excited, and then you talk to an investor and they're like, I don't get it, and then you go from there to like an employee that is like has a great idea and you're energized, and another one that like wants to leave and you're like, oh my gosh. I can't, like, switching back and forth, and you're just out there. You're vulnerable. Like, this is who I am. Critique me, like whatever. High risk of failure. Anyway,
100%. So, and we talked about this a little bit, is like how you've been a CMO, right? But now you're focusing on a creator. It's like, well, okay, I haven't really. This is all new, not a new life, right? So for me, I'm going from sales development, prospecting, training. I know that on the back of my hand. And now I'm selling to marketers. I'm like, hey, you should do this new thing, right? They're like, wait, who are you? What are you talking about, right? So I'm super transparent with this. Like, it's actually been one of the hardest things for me to do, is to continually figure out what is positioning as the market is moving at an accelerated rate. And the way you go to market is also different as well. So what are we doing at AMP? Like, our whole focus is connecting brands to buyers, because there's a ton of stats on this, and I've heard you talk about it. LinkedIn talks about it. 95% of buyers aren't ready to buy, right? So if you have a sales development team, a sales team, and they're reaching out, they probably won't take a meeting because they're not ready to buy yet, right? Because they're like, we're not there, and only 5% are ready. So we're really focusing on how do you provide content in the revenue marketing journey to support that, so that you have enough brand awareness plus demand gen, so that you can funnel that marketing journey. And so our whole thing has been like, for AMP, is marketers now have a pipeline number and they're working with sales. So we're bridging the gap between sales and marketing. And we're doing that by focusing on how do you do a production. So virtual events, in-person activations, video series, and we're all focused on that. So we come in with a strategy of how do you do that to your audience, and then how do you actually execute that moving forward. And obviously that plays into what you all built, like how do you actually track that? But we're helping people execute it so they can speak to their audience on a consistent basis. And I think the hardest thing to explain that is doing that in one sentence. And that's been the biggest obstacle, because if I can talk to someone, I'm like, that makes sense. But then it's like, what is that? And the last thing I'll add is, inside of the productions themselves, we've also realized who do you put in those productions? Right. And so a lot of people right now are just like, well, go get influencers. So this is where I probably disagree with people and have a hot take. I don't think it's just one of those. So people are like, let's go get an influencer. And I'm like, all right, like there's actually not that many B2B influencers.
And define in comparison to BC. These are people who are subject matter expertise, have subject matter experts. talk today.
Yeah.
Who have followings.
Yes.
And are creating content into that following on that subject.
Correct.
And there aren't that many of them.
There aren't that many of them because if you think, and this, I have a lot of good B2C friends, so don't come after this, but most B2C influencers, they're not subject matter experts.
Right.
They make funny videos, they're crazy antics, but like they're not subject matter experts.
Right.
It's hard to be someone who can create content and you also have a subject matter expertise. Limited information on that.
Yeah.
So what I'm telling people is, okay, that's great for B2B, but you also need your customers involved in content.
Yeah.
And then you also need your executives involved in the content.
Spokespeople.
And what I've seen is all three of those, unless I'm missing it, no B2B brand has been able to do all three effectively.
You say it again, it's influencers or creators that are subject matter experts,
right?
Customers and your spokespeople, your executives.
All at the same time.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking to solve because I realize that it's like, because I've done influencer campaigns, great.
Yeah.
But like, where are the customers involved?
Yeah.
Where are the executives? And if you do all three, you're hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And so that's like the solve, right? Because that advances pipeline. You get customers involved because the customer voice. That's what people really want to hear, right?
Yep.
If I'm an influencer and I do something and I haven't used the product, you can be like, whatever. But if I've used the product, customers are involved, executives are co-signing with that in in-person activations, virtual events, and all those things. Yeah. That's like the new way of go to market. But again, I feel the same about 2016 when I was talking about building a personal brand. People are like, oh, I don't know about that. And it's like, well, no, it's happening in real time.
It's interesting to look at it across all three of those cohorts because if you're an executive, what I've heard a lot of is like, I just don't want to be on camera.
Yeah.
And what I'm sort of advocating for, maybe my hot take is you have to. Like I
can speak to this one.
I'm interested because I think it's a fundamental part of your job description now.
It is.
Is you have to, as the human representative of the brand, under the belief that people buy from people, you have almost like it's uncomfortable. You might be an introvert like I am, but like you have to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And so what's your take on that one?
So you said you were skeptical earlier.
Yes.
I'd say 90% executives I talk to, if I approach them and say, hey, I'm gonna make you an influencer, like, no.
Yeah.
You're skeptical. I don't want to do that. I don't want to make videos. I don't want to dance. Right? It's you don't want to do that. You're gonna be skeptical. And I agree with that. Right. And you're like, no, what we actually need to focus on is become a revenue amplifier. So I've changed the way I talk about it to executives. And they're like, okay, like, I want more revenue. Because like if we run a business, I don't have a business. Right. And I do want to amplify myself. So what does that mean? And I say, look, when you create content, your goal is not to get a brand deal. And if you are, that's a different conversation. Sure. But most executives, they're trying to work on the business.
They're trying to close the deal, generate pipeline.
I don't have time to be an influencer. So I said, but a revenue amplifier is all I'm doing is I'm just amplifying your message on a platform that people are active on. Yeah. If your buyers are there and they're scrolling, that's where they're at. Yeah. They're not spending all their time looking at your website, et cetera. They're scrolling to figure out how do I solve this problem potentially. And you also can advance deals because everyone you're connected with will continuously see your content and you're remain top of mind. Yeah. So the way I tell people is like, you just need to be a revenue amplifier. I was like, imagine if you could get on a camera and speak to all your buyers and you didn't have to get on 1,000 calls.
Yes. That's it.
That's when it starts clicking for people. And a lot of people that are skeptical, I get them unskeptical by phrasing it that way.
A couple of just plus ones on that. Yeah. First is that was my role as the CMO working for Nick Kennada at Gainsight. Yeah. He was a CEO. He was our thought leader, our person. I knew that we would hit the number if I got Nick on a plane to go in front of every crowd, every field marketing dinner, every customer meeting, and bend the sort of time space continuum to put him everywhere at the same time. Impossible, obviously, right? Yeah. So my job then was like, okay, how can I use marketing channels to basically make that a super amplify Nick and his thought leadership and his presence everywhere? Exactly. And it's the same concept, but now I think really using modern tactics to really get there. The second bit is I think there's a misperception that if you're creating content, you're trying to be self-promotional. Yeah. And I saw somebody post on this on LinkedIn, whoever it was, mentioned me in it, which was really awesome. I appreciated it. Not being self-promotional, but authentically trying to educate the market and helping them solve problems.
Was that Adam?
Yeah.
Brand, I think?
Was it? You might have seen the same thing.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking. I think it's Adam.
That's right.
Yeah, I did shout out to Adam. I think that's you.
You don't know who I am. You're very famous, but I appreciate you. But I think that's exactly it. I think that's exactly it. It's like, okay, well, we're not out here trying to like, just build the Anthony Kennada brand or whatever. Like we have conviction in the market that there is a problem to solve. And our customers are struggling and everyone is struggling in this market. We think that there's a good solution here and we want to help educate the market and do our part to help folks find solutions. If our product can be a part of that, great. Like we have a great product that can help operationalize it, but through our content, we can start actually delivering value well ahead of a commercial conversation. So that when people are ready, hopefully they'll think of us first.
Exactly.
And so it's the same, I think it's interesting. It's like the same original promise for inbound marketing or some of these other things.
Yeah.
But the mediums have changed, the channels have changed. There's new headwinds that have been introduced.
Right.
And a lot more, that is, I think, of pushing us towards this now being like the net new way to do inbound or whatever.
100%. And I know I mentioned like the customers and mentioned influencers. Like one thing that I think a lot of people, when I talk to them, they're like, well, does it always have to be CEO? It's like, well, no.
Right.
I actually think the chief product officer should actually be the most involved person. When you think about this, it's like the go-to-market, right? Is like product, sales, and marketing, right? That's what it is. In a nutshell, it's merging all those.
Yeah.
So why is the chief product officer not doing more content? That's huge for a lot of companies, right? Especially if you have something super complex and they can make it simple.
Yeah.
Like, what are they talking about? Like, hey guys, here's an update that we're doing. Here's how we're going about it.
Yeah.
Having that person out there on the content is also a huge piece as well.
Yeah.
So when I tell people, hey, revenue amplifier, they're like, well, it's a CEO or the CMO. And I'm like, no, like you should get someone that's there. And then also you should have someone talking that is your buyer. Like if you have CTOs, your CTO should be the one creating all the content.
Yeah. If you're selling to the technical buyer,
they should be there, right?
Totally.
And so that's another thing as well.
Super interesting. Yeah. I think, again, thinking back to like the 1.0 marketing orgs that I've been a part of, traditionally within the PR team, we talk about spokespeople. Like I'm building a bench of spokespeople who can go on the record. And some companies it was like, all right, anyone can be on a podcast or anyone can represent the company, which good thing, bad thing. But in other very conservative companies, it's like, no, only these 4 people can go on the record because they're media trained. They're like, and that's sort of the earned media approach to thinking through this. But what I find comforting in this new strategy is like turning skepticism into belief is we're already sort of doing this in the PR team. We're already saying that Nick can't be the only one getting on a plane. We need like 3 others and we need like strategic representation from our persona internally that we're selling to and others. So how do we equip them? How do we build a platform for them? How do we grow their influence or whatever? This isn't new.
No,
the heart behind this has been around for a while.
Absolutely.
What's new is the formats. What's new is the channels, the distribution strategies.
Of course.
And so I think again, I say that as a champion of what we're doing. We're both after is I think a lot of folks just need to realize that there is a new approach to what we're talking about, but the heart of this has been the same. For the last couple of decades. Yeah, no, for sure. It's just, and again, it's uncomfortable. Yeah. Right. Because it's like, okay, wait, I don't want to. More vulnerable. Yeah. More out. You put yourself out there. Yeah. It's like, I want to go on a virtual event or like, I don't want to do this video series, but it's like, no, that's how people are going to connect with you. Yeah. Right. And you also see like the news with like Google and the emails, et cetera. Like people are just like, yo, let me go at crazy volumes and do these things. And I'm like, no. And also as well, I've been talking to people about this correlation is that like, and you all probably get this too. Well, okay, well, we hear you, but now we're gonna do it ourselves. Yeah. So we're gonna create our content ourselves. We'll track it ourselves. Yeah. And we're just gonna try it out. And I'm like, you can do that, but then here's what's gonna happen. Just like how a lot of companies would get flagged because they would send bad emails at scale, we would call that in the prospecting world burning the forest. Yes. You can also burn the forest with bad content. Yes. Right. And I was talking to a marketing executive about this. Is like you also could pick the wrong spokesperson. Yeah. And they're not credible. And now you burn the forest that way. That's right. Very true. So it's in correlation of like, oh, I was like, okay, but you could also have bad content that leads to people deterring away from your brand because they're like, I don't want anything to do with that. Yeah. So you gotta be mindful of that too. Yeah. The other thing I think what I've learned is because now I've started to do the thing too. Yeah. The last 8 months or so. How's it been? Honestly, you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's pretty you're being vulnerable. And I think I had to learn a lot. I had to change everything I knew about creating content because just my writing style is more like, this is going to sound silly, but like paragraph based. Right. I'm going to write a LinkedIn post. It's going to feel like a short story. There's not going to be all of the line breaks and all of the, hook and the short form video clip. And, you know what I mean? And so I'm like trying to build my audience or whatever early days of this without any help. Thankfully we've been getting some help in learning now. I'm like, why am I getting like 400 impressions on this like post or whatever? I'm doing all the things right. I'm not linking out, even though I started by just like throwing links at LinkedIn. They love that. And I've had to learn a new way of doing the practice I spent the last decade plus doing. And so I think that's what's great about AMP is like you're actually coming in and helping companies like again, exercise the underlying strategy they want to exercise, but you're teaching them the modern way of doing it, built on your life's practice or the professionally speaking.
And also as well, like as I've talked to a lot of founders about how they do things, it's like taking what you already know and transitioning into what's happening right now, and that's what it is. Like this is crazy. Like I look back at it because I was talking to a friend about this the other day. It's like I was an SDR 5 months into my role creating content, and just the way that I delivered it, people were like, hey, can you come run my 100% SDR team? I'm like, I just got into sales. You probably don't want that, right? People are like, yo, can you advise us on this? And I'm like, I literally just started. But it was the level of content authority I brought that brought those things along. And my concept is like, y'all, like I literally didn't know any of the acronyms in the space. And people were saying that to me. Imagine someone who has 20 years of experience and has way more insight than me. If you just take what I did, like you're gonna be fine.
So talk about that a little bit more, because I really think that's like the next level unlock with all of this is, we talked about earlier, like you don't necessarily need to be a subject matter expert to create thoughtful, amazing content in a creative way that captures attention, that's relevant and authentic. But what if you did, right? Like what if you got someone who's a 20-year veteran in the legal ops industry and they're like, I am an attorney, like I worked on these incredible cases, I have amazing work history, I work now for a legal software business, and I don't know how to create content or anything. But if someone like that worked with you or with AMP in general and said, help me both continue to do the things I'm supposed to do at work, but then take my 20 years plus of work history and experience and expertise and put that on camera. Oh my gosh, like the potential is just unheard of.
I mean, I've been doing a lot of studies on just production as a whole. Right? Like how does someone do a movie? How does someone do a TV show? So if you think about it, like the talent, the actor themselves are really good at the thing, but most actors are not going to go out there and go write the script beginning to end, because that's not where their lane is. So a lot of the times people are like, well, okay, I want to create content, but I have this knowledge, and they get overwhelmed because they don't know where to start. They don't know how to go about it. So really it's like coming in as acting as the executive producer on that to think, how do I like stage this all together? You already have the thoughts in your head. So it's actually very simple to work with people in the B2B space because they already have it in their head. They have the insight. It's just, how do I structure this and move it forward? So that's where we come in and say, okay, like here's a strategy on how to get your thoughts out there so you can start connecting with those potential buyers. And if you think of it that way and how we think about it, people, that's the key. Because that's all I need. As long as you know what you're talking about, like I can set it up and stage it for you on how to do it, right? Because it's all just a framework of execution of how you do it over and over and over again. And people just need to hear what you have to say.
We can talk forever. We have so much to say. I did want to invite anyone if any questions. I see some awesome stuff in the chat, but I don't think I found a question. So if you guys have anything for us, please post and we'll definitely answer them. You just had an event in Toronto, I think, the AMP event. Tell us about it, and then beyond the actual event, how do you see the events like format or the event channel fit into all of this?
I mean, you could probably speak this better than anyone. I mean, at Gainsight, when you're in Pulse, right? Like, so like, I mean, so I want to know, like, what made you be like, you know what, we're going to go all in on these events? And then I'll tell you like where my foresight is.
Honestly, it was being very naive and not knowing, honestly. So the story, I'll try to tell it very quickly. Joined the company before we rebranded as Gainsight. We had like 5 customers, less than 100K of revenue, very, very early days. And we ran, again, the old school playbook where our like first, I was off to a great start in marketing, my first marketing job ever. We contracted with Gartner and Forrester in my first 30 days on the job. And we started asking them we pitched them the value proposition, tell them how our customers were using us, show them the product. And they tried to bucket us under a existing research area or a magic quadrant or a wave somewhere that they were already basically trying to sell us more services into, right? And so none of that felt good because we felt like we had something different that we were selling. But they're like, you're a CRM product. Like, no, not really. Or you're a proactive customer support. We're like, that's not really it either. And in that sort of season that we were in, there was this group on LinkedIn called the Customer Success Managers in Action, I think something along those lines. And they would do these meetups around the Bay Area. And so we basically went and sat in on one of these meetups. And I'm talking like corporate park, nothing fancy, like a, whitewashed walls, pizza and beer. And there was a feeling when you walked into this room of customer success managers of like, oh my gosh, I am finally around other people that get what I'm going through. And they're struggling with the same things. We're sharing wins. And it was almost this like cathartic, very tangible thing that you sort of observe. And so there was this sort of path of, that we could have taken. One that was like, let's go down the path of Gartner and Forrester and position this company that would be called Gainsight as a CRM product. Or let's double down on this conviction of championing this audience, we didn't call it that, this persona of customer success managers who didn't have anybody fighting for them. They didn't have a brand in the marketplace that was championing them. So we had just closed the Series A and we said, all right, let's take that little event that we saw, that we just, again, pizza and beer, nothing fancy, pour a little venture capital on it and make it into a conference for customer success professionals. And so like literally within my first 90 days in the job, we hosted a conference that had 300 people come, Aaron Levy, Jeffrey Moore, and like this whole thing. Gainsight had just been rebranded. So we had to call it something. So we called it Pulse because we thought the company was going to be named after some like customer health metaphor. Got it. We were wrong. So we had this Pulse thing that we did. And so I promised a short version of this. Nothing longer. But basically, like that same feeling happened in that room, and it was almost magnified. It could have been like the fog machine and the lights or whatever it was that kind of added to the experience. But something very like profound happened in that room where the audience gathered. That I think is increasingly through the streaming stuff we're doing right now. I think is becoming, it's helping us get there. There's something special that happens when human beings get together in person. Here we are today, right? Exactly. That you just can't replicate. And so I think it's an and, I don't think it's an or. But I think if you're thinking about owned media or whatever we want to kind of call this entire thing, events are an integral part of the overall playbook. Because it's a touch point with your audience. It's a lightning rod for content creation as well. And your media program is effectively how you keep in touch with your audience between these tentpole events that you do. So I feel very strongly that those two worlds are very intermingled.
I love that breakdown answer, and it's helpful for everyone because so the way that we think about things, there's a framework, it's called the 3 A's. Just amplify, acquire, and advocate. And so when I come up with a framework or we do anything, I want to be able to do it myself. So I can tell you this is how we do it and this is how it works. So first A, amplify, is focus on what have you already done and how can you make that better? And I think a lot of people, when they say, okay, do more with less, it's like, it's just do better. How do we just do better? Right? That's what it is. So I had already done sales workshops publicly.
Okay.
And so I already knew how to do that.
Yeah.
However, I just did it with just me. I would just show up, or it was John and I, we did it together. But I realized that there's like more than just like the workshop. There needed to be more of a networking element. It needed to be like an experience. Like you walk in and like, this is like a concert. Like this is crazy. Right. And so I was like, let's try it, but then let's go to Toronto. I have a lot of connections out there. A lot of people, one of our team members is in Toronto. So it made sense to do it there. And then I said, okay, well, I've been creating content on LinkedIn since 2016. Let's just ask LinkedIn if we could use the office. So
no way.
So I flew in to Toronto, got a meeting with them, and I was like, hey, y'all, like, here's what I want to do. And they were like, I'm in. And so I was like, wait, what? Like, so I got LinkedIn for the first minute. I was like, okay, that's like this is like really serious, right? And my thing is like, if you want to do something big, like I just show up. That's my thing. And a lot of people are like, okay, the money, I don't really care about that. Like if you show up and show your intention of what you want to do, I'll do that all day long. And that's how I've always played it, especially if something big like this. And so the event, our mantra was becoming the one, because what we realized at the end of the day is that there's a lot of people out there that actually don't have the support to become better and be a 1%er. There's just stuff I'm like, okay, do you want to get a little bit better? Or like, hey, here's where I was like, no, like if you want to take yourself to the next level, this is what we're about. And so how do you become the one on your sales team? How do you become like the number one and what you do, your family? Like I wanted people who are driven to come. And so that's what we did. And so I also realized that it's not just about me creating the content. It's about a movement. Which is different because like everything I've done to the point, which has been hard, has been about like my personal brand. So I'm going to write a whole post on this, but going from a creator to a CEO is very difficult because what you're used to is talking about yourself. So like, people are like, what has happened? I'm like, okay, I know what AMP is because I'm building it, but it's also hard because it's you. You are the creator and you're used to talking about yourself. It's not an actual movement of something different.
Which is different too than saying like, okay, from me, like I think the old world would have said to talk about you, the customer. But what you're referring to is to talk about us. We are in a movement. We are a community. We are creating and building something together. And that distinction, I think, is very powerful. So totally agreed. Like there's something to a movement orientation that I think is very emotional and powerful.
100%
perspective.
And that was it. It was like AMP is a movement. We have a team around it. So I only talked for 70 minutes. And then we had another speaker, Jen, come in. She did an amazing job. Lakin came in, did an amazing job. Anish, who's on our team, he ended up moderating and co-hosting it. But here's the thing, transparently, all of that was uncomfortable. Because it's like I'm used to running the entire thing. It's because I know how to control. I know how to run the audience control. I feel I want to be in control of it. So to be like, okay, someone else speak because you're like, yo, are they gonna be on today? Like, like this is my name on it. Y'all better show up. Like, it's hard. So like, but the thing is, that event though, people coming out of it were like, this was the best event I've ever been to. People were like, when are you doing this again? Is this an annual? And I was like, yo, we just did the first one. Like, but sleep. And like, exactly. But the feedback was incredible because we came in focused on giving the audience tactics. There was no like, hey, there's a problem. Like, it was just like, here are the tactics. Here's what you need to do to learn. And our goal is to just not make it about sales, but make it about like, how do you actually become the one on what you do and amp up you personally. So the goal is to do more coming in the next year. We're already planning what that looks like. But yeah, man, it was a very like eye-opening and awesome moment. I got emotional about it because I brought my entire family as well. Amazing. And they'd never been to Canada. So, and then my mom and dad had been out of the country before. So yeah, it was like a very emotional moment for me because I told them like 2-3 years ago when I started doing like the training and stuff, I was like, I'm doing this so y'all can get out of the country one day. So like, so for them to be there was like a huge moment for me. So the event was incredible. And I'm just excited to do more of those.
Awesome. That's so good. One of the things that we opened with was before we started rolling. Might seem like a tangent, but is looking at other sources of inspiration for the things that we're talking about right now. And before we're talking about basketball, but what's interesting, and we talk about the consumer world kind of in general, but we share the passion for basketball and media,
Yeah.
basically. And it's been interesting to see that there's been a renaissance happening within sports journalism and sports broadcasting now, where if you're go with me here, everyone. I'll draw the bridge. But when we used to watch sports, we used to go to ESPN.
Yeah.
Right. Or if it's a national game, you go to NBC or whatever, wherever it's being broadcast, and that's where you get your news from. You go through a intermediary called a commentator or something along those lines, and that was how you accessed your information about sports. And then we're seeing this revolution starting. I think it started in basketball. I don't know what the source is, but again, we were joking about Draymond Green of the Warriors, referred to it as like new media.
Yep.
JJ Redick, as a basketball player, had a show called The Old Man and the Three, I think.
Yep.
All the Smoke that got acquired by Showtime.
Yep.
Even other athlete creators, LeBron having a production company with the barbershop, I think it's referred to as, where he's bringing on
the shop.
It's on
HBO, I think. Yeah.
HBO. So basically, what we're seeing now is, again, a similar trend in a way here.
Yeah.
Where, and it's going beyond basketball, like the Kelsey brothers, I forget the name of their show in football, right? That is a really good show.
It's
a thing. And we're going straight to the people behind the sports, behind the news, the inside stories, versus going through the commentators. And curious, first of all, your just opinion on that whole trend, how it impacts us, but also like people are going to the executives and the thought leaders and the practitioners, as opposed to going necessarily even to the brand. And so there's a company account page, tangible thing, or the people, the sort of LinkedIn profile of the individuals within our industry. Do you see an analogy here? What's your take?
I do. I mean, so my favorite company of all time, they've been making huge mistakes lately.
Oh no!
And the stock price.
Oh no!
Disney.
Oh yeah.
They have been terrible
right now.
They have been terrible.
Yes.
As of late.
They're in the news a lot for the Disney Plus kind of falling short. The animation business, I think, is struggling. Yeah,
just completely wrecked. And there's some political reasons around that. And we're not here for that, but like they had to let go like 400 people from ESPN.
Wow.
Historical records.
That's right.
All they fired half their commentators. Right? And so you look at it and like, wait, hold up. Why are they doing that? It's because all the new media people, right? All these new podcasts that we were talking about, like Jeff Teague, who he's hilarious. I didn't know he was funny. Jeff Teague, you got Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Gilbert Arenas, like all these dudes, right? Evan Turner, Andre Iguodala, who's really big into the tech scene as well. So he's very credible. They're all creating up their new podcasts, and they're again going direct to source. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all those different things. So why would I go watch ESPN that has become so fabricated and isn't really reporting what I want to know when I can go listen to a player who's giving me real stories? They play with the players. It's not filtered. There's no commercials, right? So I can binge that all day long. And so that's what's happening is that ESPN, again, I bring them up because they're, if you don't know, they're owned by Disney, right? They have fabricated themselves into being so PR traditional that they're actually losing opportunities. And at this point, I haven't watched ESPN in a very long time unless I'm watching a game.
Actual game.
Right. And if I want to go watch the top 10, I just go on YouTube. I'm not watching ESPN. Right. There's no reason for me to really watch it because I know it's too fabricated for me at this point. And so where does that draw the bridge? As of today, you probably speak this better than anyone, but as a consumer, most people who are marketing, they market in just a traditional PR sense. Let's go do the white paper. Let's go do the ebook. And I'm like, y'all aren't even reading these ebooks you're making, right? So it's like, why are we doing this? And so that's what's happening is a lot of the brands, the company pages, you see them, there's no connection to buyer on those, right? At all. So that's why you see that massive drop off and you see a lot of people, new media for a sense, doing what they're doing. What I've been doing since 2016, creating my own shows on LinkedIn. Hey, come follow me. Here's what's going on. You're going to see a lot more people doing that, in-person activations, customer road shows. I've heard a lot of talk on that. You're going to start seeing more of these things because people are starting to disassociate with the brand, especially this year. That's been hard for a lot of people that have been laid off. I've had people say they had an offer sent to them, accepted, oh, they're about to start in a week, and they're like, they rescind the offer. So it's like, okay, well, you just knocked me off from all my other conversations that we're having. Like, you just told me. So now people are like heavily against the brand itself. They'd rather talk to the individual now. And so that's the correlation. You're seeing it on a huge scale with ESPN, and you're going to see the same in the B2B space.
I think that's both the risk and the opportunity for marketers. Because the risk is, why would I follow company A or whatever when I can just follow your CEO or whatever it is? There's some downstream revenue impact to getting that engagement on the brand side.
Exactly.
But it's also an opportunity. How do we build sort of this, our, for lack of a better term, stable, or like our group, our cohort of voices that can actually connect with our customer, connect with our buyers, and enable them and help set them up. To your point, take the strategy, it's already in their head, the context they already have, but help them kind of deliver it in a framework that they could create those authentic emotional relationships, and then let's scale it. So I think that's kind of a, it's kind of a cheesy thing I've said a few times now, but it's never been a more exciting time to be in B2B marketing. Everything's being reinvented. Everything's being reinvented. Honestly, like when I first got into marketing, I was learning from Salesforce, I was learning from HubSpot, these companies. Now I'm learning from Mr. Beast. I'm learning from you. I'm learning from these like new media companies. Like, it's insane. And I can't remember any time, I'm sure it's happened, but I can't remember certainly in my career ever seeing a practice get reinvented before our eyes like it is right now.
It's a huge scale. And you said something interesting. So I know that you probably have seen this yourself behind the scenes. I've had people tell me this and I'm like, okay, whatever. That they're like, wait, this isn't the new way, right? Owned media is not right. This, you're like, this is
what is? Give me the answer.
Because people are like, this isn't it. We're gonna go, and so I'm like, I laugh because I've seen this movie before. The reason that people do that is because they're not willing to learn, and educate themselves on something.
That's right.
They'd rather stay in what they know, because now, guess what? Something new is coming. I have to go spend more hours to go learn that thing. So a lot of people aren't willing to do that. So when people are like, well, crap on an idea, unless it's completely wrong, right? Like, okay, like that's just incorrect.
Billboards,
It's
like, all billboards. That's how we're gonna get there.
Or like, hey, let's just go buy every single booth at an event. Like, that's just wrong. You're literally just wasting your money if you're not doing it right. So, but this is the way, and because like you see it in real time. But to your point, I think a lot of people will decide not to do certain roles and not to do certain things because they're not going to be willing to invest and educate themselves on something new. Like, I was watching a Steven Spielberg interview the other day. Like, what am I doing? Right. But it's like, but that's actually where we're going. I have to understand these things. The speak that I'm in is completely different.
It's new to our industry, but what we're talking about has been happening, at least in the new modern way, for 3 to 5 years.
Exactly.
Consumer context, and long before that in Hollywood and entertainment and media more broadly. No, but I can definitely speak to the naysayers. But I would say two things about that. I totally agree with you. There's an unwillingness to learn, but there's also this like sort of like hot take thing that I'm seeing on LinkedIn where like I've been tagged or in a few threads where they're like, this whole owned media thing is, for the birds or whatever, like not real. And you're like, you're doing the thing. You're like actively executing owned media to hate on it in an effort to build engagement and followership and conversation. And so first, that's always fun. Second is that every new thing takes a while. Like, I got to tell you, like customer success in the early days, people thought we were insane. They're like, this is account management. What are you talking about? We're like, no, this is different. And let me explain why. And it takes time and it takes, effort for things to mature. Jeffrey Moore talks about the technology adoption curve, and we're still in the innovator phase, I think, of a lot of this stuff. That's why we're evangelizing this new concept where in 3 to 5 years, we'll be talking about how to fine tune your existing owned media strategy, because this would have become more mainstream. But the other thing I would say is, look, if you are a CMO today, I'll speak to the camera. If you are a CMO today, a marketer, and for you, the pipeline is crushing it. Outbound cold calling is just on top, just really delivering the results that you need. Paid media is like fundamentally driving all of the right revenue for you. Keep going. Like, God bless you. Like, keep doing it. Don't take this as like, let's abandon the hatches. When I talk to marketers, that's just not true. Like, that's just not what we're seeing out there with people like John Miller, co-founder of Marketo, saying that the marketing playbook that he helped create
Yeah.
no longer works. So this is what we have, I think, today in marketing is, wide set appreciation of the problem.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have, like, I think from a solution, we're advocating for owned media to be the solution to kind of navigate through this. And there are others, events, and as we talked about,
Of course.
other things that I think help. But everyone, I don't know of anyone that isn't struggling to generate pipeline right now,
Yeah.
at least in the way using the same tactics we used to use.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the big thing. Like, the pipeline is the big problem. That's like our number one focus to solve, because like I've been solving that since I picked up the phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
You've been living this.
Like, that's literally what it's also, you always have to look at what you're known for, and also to figure out how can you solve that in a different way, right? With something that you've already done. And so once we realize all the problems, like, how do you do that? There's a lot of ways to do that.
Yeah.
But I think for the marketing lens, it's now you've been tied to this pipeline number where it was just pure brand awareness, or we're going to do these things.
Yeah.
And now it's like, how do we do that? But because of where the market is at, I think it actually suits to that, because you now are looking at how do you do more creative content? How do you do these events? How can you do these things of that nature? Like, there's a connective tissue there than I think ever before, because I think people are more open to doing those things. Yeah. Right. Instead of getting hit up by 1,000 things that are going on. So I think that actually makes it more interesting, is that like you almost are being incentivized to do those things. And I think the best way to think about it as a marketer, right, is looking at it as an experiment.
Yeah.
That's what we tell people about. It's like, hey, look, you need to experiment to figure out if this is going to work for you or not, right? Yep. And so once you're able to do that, then you can figure out, let's double down on that, or we can take it to a whole new level, but you have to be willing to do it. Otherwise, you get left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we can keep going. Yeah, exactly. Not too many questions here, so we can keep an eye on the questions. But I think this is fun. I mean, one of the things we were joking about with this format ahead of time was, what do we call this show? right. There might be a show here. Sample ideas thrown out were blind date, which didn't make a lot of sense. But that turned into a play on Love is Blind, of Work is Blind, where two people and we've met a little bit, but had a conversation like this,
like this,
just hit record and get to know each other, basically, right? I'm like, there's something to this format, but I think this has been a lot of fun. Yeah, I think it's been cool because again, no script, no paper. I got a computer looking at questions more than anything else, but or questions from all of you, or lack thereof. So definitely chime in if you want to know something. But it hits on so many things that we've talked about, right? Yeah. Authentic. Like, we're genuinely just getting to know each other, picking each other's brains on stuff. Hopefully a little entertaining. Using kind of modern kind of technology to distribute the content communicated at scale. We can't be where all of you are watching from today, but here we are able to connect with you. And I kind of like this format of borrowing from the consumer world a little bit. Yeah. Of just like long form kind of conversations. It'll be interesting to see if this is a thing or not. But
I think it will be, but I think it's people have to adjust to it, right? So I spend a lot of time watching YouTubers, just like Mr. Beast. Yeah. But I watch like anything YouTube wise, they're already like 5 years ahead.
Yeah, totally.
So like, I don't know if you remember at one point, like on LinkedIn, people were doing like rap videos, and there was like some rap battles. Yeah. Well, they were doing that like in 2017. Yeah. Totally. They were doing rap battles back then. Yeah. So YouTube's always ahead. And so what I've realized in a big trend for a lot of YouTubers is all of their podcasts are now video podcasts, and they're in person and they have a studio. Like every conversation I've seen is like that. Now, for most brands, they're going to be like, well, we need to be scrappy. We're not going to do things in person. We're going to do virtual. That's fine. Yeah. I have nothing against that. I think it's good to have conversations like that. You could build pipeline that way, et cetera. Yeah. But I do see a lot more people, like we're in this right now today, that are going to be like, you know what? I want to actually like get in a studio, talk to the person. That in-person podcast interview is going to be 1,000 times more interactive and better than you doing it virtually, right? Yeah. And then how do you actually do that? I think there's a ton of ways that people can take action on it. But I'm going to say that we will see more of that getting outside of the box, as we both know, and Chris Merrill says it all the time, is like, how do I get outside the box? Yeah. Right. And so like, this is a way to do that. And I genuinely believe that it will start happening more and more as people are willing to experiment and test. Yeah. But I think people are hesitant because they're like, that's a lot of money. I don't want to do that. Right. Right. But I'm like, if you think about it, it's not about how much money, it's how much time.
Yeah.
The time to do a virtual podcast is a lot because you got to do pre-production,
Right.
You got to do the interview, you got to message the person to coordinate time, you have to do post-production to promote it, then you have to publish it to the podcast Spotify itself.
Find the right assets, for promotion.
That's a lot. So if you're going to do it, you might as well go all the way in. But if you're going to do virtual, that's fine. You could run that as an experiment to test, then go in person at some point.
Yeah.
But I think to completely eliminate that from the conversation is actually wasting your time.
Interesting. Well, that's what's so cool. Like, I want to pick your brain on the YouTube thing if I can, because I mean, in a way, we're experimenting with a format here.
Yeah.
Because we've done like the interview, to your point, like scripted interview format.
Yeah.
What we're kind of experimenting here, fun, is like, we're well past the hour at this point. Long form, we can keep going or we can stop. Anything can happen.
Yeah, right.
Live TV.
Yeah.
And it's bi-directional. We're having conversation. And so I think there's an interesting thing to consider when you're planning a content program around choosing a format.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe a format that could be familiar. Like we have like a teardown show that we do called Owned. We have almost like a late night show where it's just one person talking to camera, quick kind of, drill down. Lavender does such a good job of this too with Pardon the Interruption, I think is what they refer to it. It's like the ESPN show.
Oh yeah, pardon the email or something.
Pardon the email, that's what it is. Like they have these beautiful formats, and
I
think what's really nice about that is there's almost like a cognitive reference that people have when they tune in to whatever that specific piece of programming is, and they're like, oh, this is like that thing that I'm already listening to on Spotify or whatever the case is. Do you see any or any observations on either the underlying strategy of creating formats?
I'll tell you. So this is, and I love this. This is such a visionary conversation because people who are like operator day-to-day, like, how do I operate something like that? And I was like, well, we'll get there. Yeah. But from like, I'm gonna tell you exactly what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so one of the best brands in esports. I don't know if you're big into esports. I'm massive in esports.
Yeah.
I think I might have told this, but I did. JK knows this, but like professionally Halo 2.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I didn't
so
know
like I'm deep in this.
Yeah.
It's like I watch esports stuff like that.
So this is a 100 Thieves brand you're drinking right now. I don't know if you knew that.
Okay, so that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Oh, is it? Okay.
100 Thieves.
Yeah.
So Nate shout out to him.
Yep.
He has created the best brand out there.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you watch their videos, it's not about just him.
Right.
And I think it's one of the hardest things when you have someone like him who is a very successful creator and also gamer to then not make it just about him. And I relate to him in a lot of ways because like it's the same way that I have also grown my brand as well.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, I run this, but like at the same time, I have other people who are creating.
Right.
And so if you watch their videos, I've said this pretty extensively.
Yeah.
They will do like advice-based videos on, hey, here's how to do gaming, but they have obviously their streamers in there. But what I love that they do is they'll have like team videos around certain concepts. So they have one where it's like, they do like, what are the top like animes or video games of all time on a system?
Oh,
so they have like two teams, and then they'll be like, okay, like how do I rank this? And then like the competition, right? And it's like
competition format.
Right, exactly. But here's the thing: you connect with everyone on the team because, like, okay, I know Nadeshot is, I know Valkyrie is, Courage, etc., but I don't know the other people. Yeah. So now I get to see other personalities that now connects me with the brand even more. Yeah, and be like, yo, who's that guy on your team? That guy is hilarious, right? Or that woman is dope, right? Yeah. And so I think there's a different concept where it's like, again, I mentioned the creator, the customer, and executive. Yeah. I now get to see customers on how they interact with your brand, right? And it's like, oh, okay, that's how they interact with the brand, right? These are things I have not seen yet, and what we're trying to do. Yeah, but like 100 Thieves does all these different content types to bring you in. It's educating you, it's entertaining, but I get to see who's behind the actual brand. Yeah.
Just riffing on it a little bit, I'd love to see if you're a marketing company creating content, like, can you get like Udi from Gong, Megan Eisenberg? Can you get Kyle Lacey? Put them all on a team, right? And watch them rank something like that'd be incredible. It's must see TV for our industry.
Like that would be so cool. It seems like no one is doing that.
No one's doing it today.
Huge opportunity to bring those people together. And like
you got that one. You got that one.
But like 100 Thieves, I believe from a brand perspective has done it the best from any brand that I've seen. I'd probably say the Sidemen, they're out of the UK, so KSI leads that, and they have a couple of people well. They've done that well from just a pure play entertainment perspective. Okay. But as an actual company and a brand, the 100 Thieves has probably done that the best, right? Because they have about 8 to 10 content types, archetypes, if you go through it, that they do, and they rotate on.
So study the consumer brand that has got brands that have gone before us. Ones that lean into video and YouTube, 100 Thieves.
Exactly.
And those are great examples. Look for the formats. Yeah. Look beyond the actual content being delivered and look at the underlying structure of what they're doing. And then have some curiosity around, like, what would this look like for accountants or for legal, community, whatever.
And here's the trick. I'm going to go back to Spielberg because he said this and I was like, does anyone realize this? So he was in an interview and he was like, how are you successful? How are you producing all these movies? And he's like, y'all, I literally I look at books and I just make them better in visual format. Every successful movie that he's produced has been a book before.
Yeah.
So he already had the context.
Yes.
He wasn't coming up with something brand new. He already had the context to just make it better.
Right.
And so a lot of the times, I think a lot of it's from an ego perspective as well. And I can say this too. It's just like, you want to create something and say, I did this.
Sure. From marketers in general, I think share that same.
I get it. I did this. But it's like, it'd be easier if you just said, hey, I just saw this concept. It was really cool. And I just made it contextualized for my industry.
Interesting.
Because the 100 Thieves example, I bet most people in B2B have no idea who they are.
Right.
But I just look at the format. They've been successful. Why would I go try to create something brand new?
Yeah.
I just look at a model successful. We contextualize it. We bring it to the industry.
Totally.
And so I think if more people did that, they would go be more successful.
Yeah. You can even take that to beyond format too, of like relevancy. So I don't know why this is coming to mind, but GDPR.
Yeah.
And you're like, great. Like, this is a legal kind of, I don't know why I'm picking on GDPR, but like let's say the end of third-party cookies that is now going to be implemented in Google next year. How do I take this topic that is somewhat complex and explain it to my audience of marketers, accountants, finance professionals, legal, and so it's beyond even format, but taking like topical things that are being discussed within the broader industry.
Oh, 100%.
But delivering it, repackaging it, but delivering it to my audience in a way that's contextual.
I'll give a prime example. And then I would love to hear your perspective on it, because probably both those examples on how you're probably positioning Audience Plus. So when GDPR first came out and I was doing sales training, most sales trainers that were freaking out.
Yeah.
Because they're like, okay, now I can't train a European audience. How do I do emails? And I was like, okay, like, let's think about it in a positive, like, how can we like position this to actually help them?
Yeah.
So I actually went through and read most of the stuff for GDPR. It's very long. I don't suggest people read the whole thing, but I browsed it. Right, I browsed it. Right. We didn't have ChatGPT back then. Right. So I want to just put it in there, but like I browsed it and it was like, it said nothing about cold calling.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
You could cold call.
Yeah.
And so I was like, hey, y'all, okay, you can't do emails. You can't do email blasts. LinkedIn is a little iffy because like in some countries, they don't really use LinkedIn. Germany has a different LinkedIn. Right. And so I was like, hey, there's nothing on here about cold calling.
Yeah.
So we can cold call. Right.
Yeah.
And so people were like, yeah, that's true. Yeah. We can cold call. I was like, we also can complement LinkedIn. So I positioned that when I would reach out to companies in Europe saying, hey, look, subject line GDPR.
Yeah.
That's like 100% open rate, right? Like everyone's over that email.
Right.
And I would say, hey, look, like I know here's the rules. I've actually worked on companies on like cold calling to like combat this.
Yeah.
While you try to figure out email, let's talk. So I was in Europe a ton around that time when it was coming out, training teams on how to do cold calling and LinkedIn messaging, because I knew that was the way to solve it.
Yeah.
And I saw results from that.
Yeah.
So when something of this news happens, okay, at first you're like, okay, that's crazy. But I look at it as like, how do we actually use that to position ourselves and then follow on this narrative? And you probably are thinking about the same way as well.
Totally. Yeah, it's all, it goes back, I think, to the core of like relevancy, authenticity, and making sure that we're, like I think we aspire to be the source of news for our audience.
Yeah,
and a lot of that has to do with this filter that we have called owned media.
Yeah.
But there are other things orbiting that filter that come into play. And I think so long as we can commit to, quickly and regularly be that source of information. I think it's hard for a lot. I think there's something about speed too. I don't know if you've seen this in your business, but like being able to like be on the front end of the trends and
for sure.
it is important. Trend jacking, I think, is the language in the PR earned context. But if you can kind of steadily drop like new relevant pieces of content often and you're viewed as a credible source of information, then I think it's okay to kind of bring some of these other ideas into the fold.
Yeah, 100%.
I have a sneeze that I'm fighting back. Awkward faces on camera. That's what's happening now. And there we go. We did it. Okay, Morgan. On that note, it's been awesome, man.
Yeah,
thank you so much for coming down and hang out with us. I think for a couple days, hopefully.
Yeah.
Studio of yours.
Yeah, take it out for sure.
Enjoy it. How can folks find out more information on AMP?
Yeah.
Little tape delay here in the office. How can folks find out more information about you?
Yeah, so just on LinkedIn, message me if you're like, hey, we're trying to figure out how to create that innovative content to get in front of people and advance your pipeline, and that's our main focus in helping marketers there. We also have ampcreative.io, so you can go check that out. And willing to answer any further questions. But man, this was a pleasure.
Awesome.
We can go on easily for another hour. We got things to do.
This is great.
But it was good.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here, man. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Cheers.